That's how easy it is to do what is done. And opinions too are changed very, very quickly. I think Jacques Ellul said people don't really consciously think through things. They actually do it through a form of osmosis. They hear the experts prattle away, and it sinks into their subconscious without going through any formal process of reasoning or critical analysis. And then it becomes their opinion, especially when everyone around them adapts and adopts that opinion so quickly too. That's how it's really, really done. And I've talked before this week and the last maybe couple of weeks on Bertrand Russell, who was a big player in all of this phase that you're going through today. And he literally, amongst with others, again the Huxleys and all the big players of the time who did write about it and were not complaining. They wrote because they knew that most folk would never read their stuff anyway or even know what they're really getting at. And you find that this is what he said in the Scientific Outlook. He says the care of infants, this is for the time we're already been in for a little while. Infants intended to belong to the governing class would seldom be left to the mothers. Well, that's the way it is with them. They're sent off. They get special nannies now. Mothers would be selected by their eugenic qualities, and these would not necessarily be the qualities required in a nurse. On the other hand, the early months of pregnancy might be more burdensome than at present, since the fetus would be subjected to various kinds of scientific treatment intended to affect beneficially not only its own characteristics, but those of its possible descendants. By the way, when you think of scanning the fetus with microsound in the womb, I've gone through the articles about that too. They made it a trend again. You pass, let's see the fetus in the womb, mummy, and she was all over the internet, and how it heats up the brain of the baby, because fetus really is just a baby, and it can cause brain damage. So there's obviously a technique for the masses as well. Anyway, fathers would, of course, have nothing to do with their own children. Well, we're here already. This was written in the 1930s. So he'd already planned this phase. He didn't do it himself. He didn't learn this by himself either. He was a member of an elite, a multi-generational elite. And he was specially bred for his task and taught for his task as well. It says that there would be, in general, only one father to every 5 mothers. Well, you've seen that with artificial insemination for the last 30-odd years. And it's quite likely that he would never even have seen the mothers of his children. That's just what he said. The sentiment of paternity would thus disappear completely. Probably in time the same thing would happen, though to a slightly less degree in regard to mothers. If birth were prematurely induced and the child separated from its mother at birth, maternal sentiment would have little chance to develop. Now, I read an article a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, where that's how they've actually got the chickens in the coops now. They actually altered the brain, genetically altered the brain and the offspring, so they keep producing their kind now, and there's no bonding between the mother and chicks. You think you can't do that to humans too, through chemical means? It says amongst the workers it is probable that less elaborate care would be taken, since it's easier to breed for muscle than to breed for brains, and it's not unlikely that women would be allowed to bring up their own children in the old-fashioned natural manner. There would not be among the workers the same need as among the governors for fanatical devotion to the state, and there would not be therefore on the part of the government the same jealousy of private affections as bonding. Among the governors, one must suppose all private sentiments would be viewed with suspicion. That was put into 1990, Brave New World, I should say. A man and woman who showed any ardent devotion to each other would be regarded as they are at present, regarded by moralists when they are not married. There would be professional nurses in creches and professional teachers in nursery schools. We've got all that now. But they would be considered to be failing in their duty if they felt any special affection for the special children. Children who showed any special affection for a particular adult would be separated from that adult to make sure there's no bonding, you see. That's how you bring up a psychopath too, with psychopathic personalities. No bonding, no affection, and so on. Ideas of this kind are already widespread. They would be found suggested, for example, in Dr. John B. Watson's book on education. The tendency of the scientific manipulator is to regard all private affections as unfortunate. Freudian was quite a character too. He took God from his elevated position and put it below his belt, He had a fixation down there. Anyway, and taking drugs all the time. Anyway, have shown that they are the sources of complexes. By the way, that's why they bring a Freud or a Darwin forward in time. And again, make a star out of, and making stars out of scientists. Of course, that was very important. Who speak with authority, even though they're talking a lot of nonsense. But if it fits the job, it does the job at the time. That's all that matters. Administrators realize that they stand in the way of a wholehearted devotion to business. The church sanctions certain kinds of love while condemning others, but the modern ascetic is more thoroughgoing and condemns all kinds of love equally as mere folly and a waste of time. Now his pal, Julian Huxley, the head of UNESCO, the guy that was to give you the education for the world, for the children, said the same thing, that they encourage basically and separate the sexual aspect from any bonding. They separate completely, and they'd really work on that. Well, that's been done today. It's just they should say bang, bang, thank you, ma'am, and that's it. That's where you are today. And it's interesting too, since all these guys love Plato's Republic with a guardian class of rulers, when you think about it too, because Plato also went through these kinds of things where all women would be in common. And if you understand how you perceive things, when all women are free and easy, they are technically in common for the whole of the male society. What would we expect of the mental makeup of people in such a world? The manual workers may, I think, be fairly happy when we assume that the rulers will be successful in making the manual workers foolish and frivolous. Work will not be too severe, and there will be endless amusements of a trivial sort. And that's what you've got on television and sports and all that stuff, and soaps and movies. Owing to sterilization, love affairs need not have awkward consequences so long as they're not between a man and a woman who are both of them unsterilized. In this way, a life of easygoing and frivolous pleasure may be provided for the manual workers, combined, of course, with a superstitious reverence for the governors instilled in childhood and prolonged by the propaganda to which adults will be exposed. That's how it's done. You see, you put an imprint in childhood. These are special people with the suits and ties who rule your country, etc. And you give them reverence from then on, because the media will just reinforce it for the rest of your life. These are the guys who bring you war and see weapons of mass destruction. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, we're back cutting through the matrix, reading some of the scientific outlook by Bertrand Russell to show you that it ties into with the article I read earlier about the Vatican and the Pope and the masculine suits and the culture industry and all the rest of it. And page 258 he says, in such a world, though there may be pleasure, there will be no joy. The result will be a type of displaying the usual characteristics of vigorous ascetics. They will be harsh and unbending, tending towards cruelty in their ideals and their readiness to consider that the infliction of pain is necessary for the public good. Do you understand what I just read there? It says, they will be harsh and unbending. This is the ruling, the ones they hire and so on, working on us now through this phase of it, tending towards cruelty in their ideals and their readiness to consider that the infliction of pain is necessary for the public good. Well, we've had nothing but torture. They made movies about it too, where they torture someone and it saves the day, of course, for the information. I do not imagine that pain will be much inflicted as punishment for sin, since no sin will be recognized except insubordination and failure to carry out the purpose of the state. It is more probable that the sadistic impulses which the asceticism will generate will find their outlet in scientific experiment. Well, we're all getting experimented on now. We're just cattle, you see, and animals. We're no different than any other animal, so they can do what they want with you. And you already see it with fetal tissues. You see it with bodies hanging in wires, plasticized at shows, etc. It says the advancement of knowledge will be held to justify much torture of individuals by surgeons, biochemists, and experimental psychologists. I've gone through some of the articles here where they were experimenting, even putting plutonium into blacks in America, claiming that they had cancers which they didn't have, so they could see what would happen to them. See, we're just experimental beings now. There's nothing holy about you or sacred about you or anything else, you see. As time goes on, the amount of added knowledge required to justify a given amount of pain will diminish, and the number of governors attracted to the kind of research necessitating cruel experiments will increase. So it's going to get worse and worse and worse, you see. Remember too, every government now has their unelected panel of scientists on board, like John Holdren, that wants to kill most of you off. And they're quite serious about it. And there's just a continuation of the same group that Russell belonged to. Just as the sun worship of the Aztecs demanded the painful death of thousands of human beings annually, so the new scientific religion, and it is a religion by the way, experts, it's religion, will demand its holocausts of sacred victims. And you're going to see them starve a lot of folk to death too. Gradually the world will grow more dark and more terrible. Strange perversions of instinct will first lurk in the dark corners and then gradually overwhelm the men in high places. Well, they're all into weird stuff, that's all I'll say. Sadistic pleasures will not suffer the moral condemnation that will be meted out to the softer joys, since, like the persecutions of the Inquisition, they will be found in harmony with the prevailing asceticism. So, that's only part of it, of course, and they even go into what will happen eventually in a breakdown of that system, but they also have the next part worked out to take over. So you see, you're living through a script, folks, and it's a script that one man didn't write, and lots worked on it, that they were already descended and descendants of a ruling class. We're always taught there's always bumbling fools in these classes, but they're not bumbling fools at all at the top. Because 1 out of every 10 of their offspring isn't sort of retarded or defective because of inbreeding. They actually have this incredible psychopathic ability to see us as nothing more than amoebas to be used. And that's what we're going through today.